I said, well, maybe I could assign characters to each one of the teeth. And so I start doing research and I'm like, oh, well, this is the job of the molars. This is the job of the incisors. Oh, so the molars would be a demolition crew in a Western. So this whole book kind of formulated in my head about kind of an Old West, kind of a ragtag team of, bad teeth.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in.
Hey everybody, it's Chad Johnson with Everyday Practices Podcast, and today I have Regan on here. Regan, how you doing up in the Pacific Northwest?
Oh my gosh, I'm doing fantastic. I am really excited for today's conversation.
Excellent. And we have such a special guest on that I can't pronounce his last name. And I heard, Regan, you pronounce his last name, and I was like, ooh, that's fancy. So Tom, would you, Regan, please pronounce Tom's last name and introduce him since you know him so well?
Absolutely. Tom Latourette is our guest today, and I have known Tom for a better part of a decade. We have worked together. We have been friends together. We've talked business and personal, and he's a whiz at all things sales. Sales management, sales coaching. And what I learned over working with him in the professional sense is that he has this hugely, like TV, funny or die worthy creative side that is, we put on the business suit and we talk business and we have careers, but this is really interesting to me because Tom, you are one of those people that has an equally creative side and hugely talented. And you have turned your creative talents into a hobby that has given away almost $1.5 million to local charities. And we're excited to have a conversation with you today about that journey.
Well, wow. So first off, thank you for those wonderful words. That's, it's interesting. I always felt like I was an actor or a creative talent trapped inside a salesperson's body, right? There was something trying to get out. And it was funny. Our foundation, the BTB Foundation, really almost became a laboratory for me to try out some of these things and maybe stop me from being a serial killer. Like at least it got it out of my system, right?
Oh, good.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, so what is BTB? Just like business to business, or like yours a special BTB? 20 years ago. So my brother and I'm the oldest in our family. My brother's name is Bill. I'm Tom, and our best friend was a guy by the name of Paul. I've known Paul, so I'm 57 years old now. We've known Paul since I was 4. He lived 2 houses away from us, and his 20 years ago, his wife had breast cancer, and she's going to walk in the Avon Breast Walk, and she had to raise $3,000. And so my brother and I said, hey, why don't you take care of yourself, do your healing journey, and do what you need to do for yourself. We'll construct a golf outing to raise the $3,000 for you. And so the first Beat Tom and Bill was born. So my brother and I are very competitive. So BTB Foundation, Beat Tom and Bill, beat cancer. And so that first outing, we had 30 of our friends came to the golf course, and my brother and I golfed ahead of time. And we'd leave, hey, this is where we hit the ball, that you got to hit it farther than this, closer to the pin here. And we raised $3,000. Now, fast forward 20 years, so we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We are regularly doing this event outside of COVID. I mean, we modified it this year just because of COVID. But right before COVID, we'd have 300 golfers, 500 people for dinner. In one day, we'd raise $150,000, and we've given $1.5 million to over 100 local Chicago families that are fighting cancer. And so, and it's really cool. And so, but we kept the premise the same. So Beat Tom and Bill is an event where my brother and I golf ahead of time.
And people come on the golf course, and on every hole, they're trying to beat a shot that we've done. But while they're doing that, Chad, there's a polka band in their background on one hole. The next hole, there's a barbershop quartet. The hole after that, they have to sit on a toilet and hit the ball. The hole after that, there's somebody in a Tyrannosaurus Rex costume, and they have to bind. So then we put a rubber band around their hands so that they have to tee off with tiny little hands, like a T-Rex. Exactly. So every hole has something stupid and challenging. And so, people walk into that event thinking it's just going to be a regular golf outing, and they walk out like, oh my, what did I just experience? This is crazy. Right. And so, and that's kind of been our brand. And so,
so from Beat Tom and Bill Beat Cancer, I knew you definitely during the golf outings and the dinner events and all of that. Yeah. And I also knew that you had a passion for storyboarding and storytelling. When did that transition into making charitable books, children's books, with kind of the humorous slant to it?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I remember as a kid saying I always wanted to be a writer. As an adult, I always would say I wanted to be a writer. And so I would do some parody songs that would support the golf outing. And then I also did some parody songs. I'm a Chicago White Sox fan. I had a lot of Chicago Cub fan friends. And so I would do parody songs that were making fun of my Cub fan friends. And a local DJ in the Chicago area, somebody sent one of my songs to the local DJ. He started playing them. And all you need to do is feed fuel to that fire. And then once I knew I had somebody who would play my songs, I would send them. And so one of my songs actually got written up by AP, Associated Press. It kind of went viral. It was right before the Cubs were going into the playoffs. It's called Cub Fans, Please Stop Believing. So it was a parody of Don't Stop Believing.
Yes.
And it was Please Stop Believing. And that had about 1 million views. So that was probably the closest I ever came to internet fame, and so I was always kind of writing humorous things and capturing those. And so I wrote a children's book called I Had a Runny Nose. And it sat in my computer for maybe 6 years. And then finally, through our golf outing, I met somebody who was an illustrator. And I'm like, his sister was an illustrator. And I said, would your sister, if I gave her this book, you think she'd illustrate it? And he goes, well, yeah, that's what she does. And so I paid her to illustrate my first book. And that sat in my computer for 6 years. And then, so literally I've got this book that is sitting in my computer, and all I'm thinking about every year is, oh, don't die and leave something behind. You got to get it out there, right?
And my son, who's 7, loves that book.
Great. I love it. I had so much fun writing that. And, it ends with the kids saying, you can keep all your fancy friends, but it's my nose I will pick. The kid's nose runs off his face. And so then we're doing our golf outing, and we're helping a family that had a young child. And I knew the uncle, and he starts a specialty printing publishing house. And so I go to Rick and I say, Rick, I've had this book. It's printed, it's illustrated, it's illustrated, it's done. Can we? And he goes, yeah. And so that was born. And so I figured, if I get these books out and 100% of the proceeds of the books go to the foundation, I figured that would be a way for me. Maybe that's another incentive for me to do more of these. And so once I did the first one, I had a lot of fun doing that. I wrote, I had an upset stomach. And so that was about a kid's stomach that kid feeds it and gives it a lot of food. And the stomach is really angry and gets upset and can't decide whether the food's going to exit the one way, the front or the back, right? And so that's kind of the premise of that book. But once you kind of start those juices flowing, you can't stop them. And so, COVID hits, and then I wrote 2 books fairly quickly. I had a rotten tooth, again, kind of this play on, I had a runny nose, upset stomach, rotten tooth. And I'm like, well, what would that look like? And so out of that book came, I said, well, maybe I could assign characters to each one of the teeth. And so I start doing research and I'm like, oh, well, this is the job of the molars. This is the job of the incisors. Oh, so the molars would be a demolition crew in a Western. So this whole book kind of formulated in my head about kind of an old West, kind of a ragtag team of, bad teeth that are going to take over the Candy Bar Express at high noon the next day, but they're stopped by an intrepid group of dentists and, anti-dentals and, all that. And so.
Is that a Seinfeld almost reference?
So there is a Seinfeld reference in the book to anti-dentites. And so.
Right.
And all my books are rhyming. So, I kind of applaud myself on rhyming things with anti-dentites and that, so.
That's right.
And then this one, I found an illustrator who all of a sudden I send her I send her the book and it's just in written form. And she sends me some drawings back. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, first off, I reached out to Regan and I said, Regan, would you try? And she's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'll have enough time, but Regan created two.
Or enough talent. It was.
Don't go there because the drawings you sent me were fantastic. And, but it was a place of, all of a sudden she's got a young family and she's like, and I have a full-time job, which I do too. That's the challenge, right?
COVID hitting definitely picked up the spice in PDA because it's like, okay, take all your curriculum and now online. That pretty much knocked me out for a good 8 months.
So this was the first time I was actually forced to find a professional illustrator. The other folks who had done my books were just they were doing it as a hobby. And so now I'm dealing with a professional illustrator and she's fantastic. And all of a sudden she creates a whole world out of the words that I wrote. And it's so cool. And, then to be able to say, hey, listen, I'd like us to have, so at one point there's a picture of all these teeth standing together, the molars, the incisors, the bicuspids. It's Billy Bicuspid and the Rotten Tooth Gang. And so it's a whole, the 8 bicuspid brothers and sisters and they're all standing there. And I was like, hey, let's try to make it look like it's the inside of a mouth. And she comes with this drawing that, shows, okay, there's a desert background. And so it takes place in a town called The Mouth. And it's just, it was really a lot of fun to do. And I'm excited because it's coming out shortly. So and hence the reason we're having this conversation. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. So there's something to be like, there's two bigger pictures about this as well. Number one, a dental office could potentially buy this. And then, I've got the cheat sheet notes to see more about this BTB Foundation and it's a buy one, give one. Can you explain to us what that's about?
Yeah. So, I thought, I think, the opportunity to actually purchase a book, but then give one to a local charity. How can we go even one step further? So even though all the proceeds are going to benefit the BTB Foundation, I thought was, there's a lot of local children's hospitals. We've actually had some people who have bought $100 or $200 worth of books that said, hey, instead of giving it to me, I don't have any kids. Why don't you give it to the local hospital? And I thought, what a cool way that would be to maybe just incent people to purchase a few more books if they knew that they can take one for themselves, but also one would be going towards a local hospital that is helping kids going through cancer. And so, and I figured when I talked to Regan, I was like, wouldn't that be kind of cool if we just figured out how to do that locally? And so my thought was that if any dentist wants to say, hey, this is our local hospital, we'll do the work of reaching out to that hospital and saying, listen, here's these 20 books were purchased for children for that inside that hospital. And inside each book would have a little stamp that says these books are courtesy of ABC Dentistry. And we just thought that would be kind of a cool way to get more books in people's hands. But then also maybe from a dentist standpoint is how do I educate kids maybe a little bit more about dental literacy and then how do I maybe promote my business in a way that is a kind of a strong way to be community focused? Because
which broaches the second part of that this could be one example of creative ways that you can market and brand your office and use PR in that regard, where you're doing good while you're helping people out and also promoting yourself. I mean, there's some promotion aspect to it, but you're also doing a lot of good.
Yeah. And it's more, the promotion is really kind of on the back end, right?
Of course.
It's more on the front end as you're doing really good. And and one of the things I do see, Chad, and not just in the dental industry, but we work with industries throughout. And I've got two daughters, 25 and 22. And what I love about this generation is they are forcing organizations to think about community focus, charity first. They won't come to companies unless there's a charitable piece of what they're doing and how they're giving back. And I think that's really cool. And so, it kind of forces you to think in terms of, okay, how can I leverage and make, so I have a lot of fun. This is a hobby for me, putting the books out is a hobby, and it's one that I think I have a lot of fun doing it. But, there's also a part of me that is thinking, how can you leverage that hobby and make it, make even more footprints in the world. Right. And so.
Right. Well, and Tom, this is 100%. I mean, what PDA would call doing good while doing good. Like 100% of the proceeds are donated. Is that correct? So it may be a buy one, get one. You get a book, you give a book to a local. I love the marketing angle. Of course, we love the marketing angle because the community presence and all of that. But I think that's the other part that sort of stopped me in my tracks. And you're a generous person. You're using your hobby in a generous way. So 100% of it goes. So you collect the dollars, we get the books, or the dental practice gets the book. And then you donate one locally to their local hospital of their choice.
That is the intention and the focus. So
then the proceeds from the book go where?
So the proceeds from the book would go to the BTB Foundation. And so again, our foundation helps local Chicago families that are fighting cancer. And then every year we pick somewhere between 8 and 14 families that'll benefit from the money we raise. Now, typically in the past, we've only done the one event, but doing things like these books allow us, occasionally we'll have a family that'll send us an email. Our event is in May or September, depending on when we do it. But let's say somebody sends an email in November and says, "Oh, we're having trouble. We heard about your foundation this way." It'd be nice for us to be able to, help some families that way too. So that's kind of what our hope is in terms of creating more ways that the BTB Foundation can help local families that are fighting cancer. So, and we're a 501c3 certified by the state of Illinois, and so anything is a tax deduction. So these are all tax deductible gifts and things like sponsorships, things like that. That's all tax deductible. So,
can you tell us, Tom? I want to get a little dental nerdy with you just a little bit. So when you first approached me with this concept, I thought, oh my gosh, one, it's going to be really fun. And then two, what are dentists going to say? Like, these teeth either better be illustrated correctly or named correctly. Like, there's going to be talk about it. And you sent me a note about actually including diversity in this book. And I'm like, it's a book about teeth. Like, I opened the book, which it is illustrated gorgeously. It's teeth. How did you do that?
Well, so I'm in my real world job, sales and sales management, coaching and consulting. I'm part of a Chicago networking group, and got about 350 members in the Chicago area. And I'm also part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion group in there. And as I'm looking at the first set of drawings, and I sent the book to both of my children, my daughters, Claire and Christine. And I said to them, I was like, I love everything about it. I'm just a little bit concerned that I don't think we have enough diversity in it. And my oldest daughter replied almost immediately saying, "Dad, I was going to say something." And so I was like, okay, now what do I do? And so while the majority of the characters are teeth. There are also characters that are modeled after various, we call them the Dirty Dozen, Amelia Abscess, Perry and Don Titus, Polly Plack. And so I'm taking kind of the Dirty Dozen are, key things that are affecting teeth, but so we made those into humans. And that's where we took some of the opportunity to add some diversity. And so I thought Katie Williams, our illustrator, did a fantastic job. I did some research and I saw that I think it's 30% of dentists are Asian. Is that about right? And I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8% are
Chad and I both just gave a questionable. Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure exactly what the percentage is. I know we have a lot of diversity in dentistry.
Yes, yeah.
I think it also depends on the area you're at. I mean, man, if you're in California, certain demographics is going to dominate more as opposed to Wisconsin, as opposed to Georgia.
Yeah. So I thought nationally, I just wanted to make sure that if a kid picks the book up, there's a possibility of them seeing themselves in that book,
right?
And so we patterned. We patterned one of the characters, Fluoride Flo, off of the actual first Chinese dentist, and then Dominic, the dentist, is actually patterned after a African American dentist, and he was also a civil rights leader. And so I sent these pictures after doing some Google research. I sent these pictures to the illustrator, and she's like, "Okay, great." And then she comes back. I'm like, "Oh, that's perfect. It's so cool." And so a little bit of I'll reference that on the website. I won't really reference it in the book. It's just, but I'm going to point kids back to that. So there's a space where at least kids can learn. Maybe not only will they learn about the dentists or the teeth themselves, but also a little bit about, some of the, maybe even a little bit of history of dentistry in this children's book about a bunch of renegade teeth who are trying to take over a sugar train, and so.
I appreciate the level of detail that you went through to create this, because it's not, it's definitely, once you see the book, and we're going to play a video too. I think we're going to do it post-production. Awesome. We're going to play a video. We'll put in the link so everybody can watch it there. It is really well polished and really well put together. So although this is your hobby, this could easily be your career. And I'll tell you, my little nerd white heart got really excited. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I'm watching Discovery, the series Discovery, with my family right now. And there's a character named Tilly, Ensign Tilly. She is a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger. She has big red curly hair like me. Her face structure is the same. And I immediately, might as well have been 8 years old again. I was like, right. Oh my gosh, there I am in Star Trek. I just went into this and she becomes captain, and I'm like, that's right. So
right?
There
is, of course, she'd be captain, right?
Yeah. There's so much power, I think, in being able to relate to that, when you're a kid and see somebody else in that. So the fact that you went to that level of detail in this book, it kind of blew my mind. I mean, it relates to the characters. I know you, but for those who don't know you, that is you.
Yeah. And so that's actually, when I come back and I look, there's a few things that, I've gotten older. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary of Beat Tom and Bill. And there was one hole where we had signs of every single family that we've supported. And so you're on this golf hole, and as you're driving down the golf hole, you're seeing, a 2-foot by 4-foot picture of all 110 families.
No kidding.
And I remember driving down that, in the morning before everyone's coming. I was driving down that with my daughter, and I was really struck. It's interesting when, over the course of 20 years, when you do something 1 year at a time, maybe you don't really recognize impact, right? But I remember standing, and as we started driving, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And we did a thing. We showed a video of every single one of the families that we supported, and it really blew people away. Our supporters, people who've been with us a long time. And so I am in a space, as you get older, I think you learn to be a little bit, gratitude is, I'm in a space of looking back on however I've gotten this place where I can yeah, make a book about a rotten tooth. And then all of a sudden, my brain kind of goes into wherever it goes, right? And then it starts doing research and like, oh, well, this would be funny. And then, oh, what about this? This would be kind of funny. And sometimes it feels like it'll never get done. But then it gets done. You find somebody who actually can illustrate it, and this whole collaborative thing happens. And it's really cool to be a part of that process. And then if it can make a difference, that's even cooler, right? Like that's even more fun. I mean, just one, to get it out and get it done is one thing. But then, if kids can read it and go, oh my gosh, that's funny, or I see myself, or, I learned something, then that's great. So
if people want to check out this website more for the foundation stuff, where can they go? And then within that, can they find the book details?
Yes, definitely. So our foundation is www.btbfoundation.org. I actually have an author webpage. So it's toml-author.com. And folks can, see about the 4 books that I've done. I've actually not only I Had a Rotten Tooth, but Opera Boy is also going to be premiering at the same time. And that's both of my kids are in musical theater. So I took opera, almost if you can think about a baby being in the womb for 9 months in a performance hall, learning how to sing before it pops out. That's kind of the premise. And then the baby comes out singing all these operas, and so now I'm educating children on operas, but almost to the same degree, right? And so folks can find out, and then I'm working on a few other books that I'm hoping to do next year. And
very cool.
Yeah. So I'm hoping, even though this is a hobby, it's something I really enjoy doing. And I'm hoping, over the course of the next 3 or 4 years that I'll have maybe another 8 to 10 books out. So, and, another part of me is always going to be thinking, okay, how can I not just make an impact with the foundation, but what are other ways that I could make an impact? And so.
Well, Tom, congratulations about the success that you've had so far, and cheers to the upcoming success too, with some of these details that will be more publicly published for your foundation and for.
Oh, well, thank you guys for the
really
opportunity
cool
to talk about it. I mean, just to make people aware of it. And
right.
I thank PDA for just, it was nice to know, even as I'm thinking about printing it. And, when I talked to Regan was like, yeah, I think there's some legs there, and we could probably do something with that. And I was like, and so that's a space where all of a sudden I was knowing that I was like, okay, what could I do that would make an impact for Regan's dentists, and, even make the impact, not just in Chicago, but in other parts of the country too.
Right.
So.
Right. Very cool. Well, Regan, thanks for bringing Tom on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom, for being with us today and all you do. Great conversation today. Thank you. I'm excited. I'm excited for all of our docs to hear about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I just even like the fact that that Regan, everyone with their own talents can be implementing their best to the cause, and stuff like that. So, surely this is kind of outside the box of dentistry, but nonetheless, running across Tom in your career, Regan, and then being able to say, okay, now how could I make a difference? Not just for teeth sake, right. It's not that. It's making a difference in families with cancer. It's making a difference with people that are having a tough time, lugging stuff to the hospital while your child is there. I mean, it's all that kind of stuff. So that's very cool that you're using your talents to be able to be a symphony of people caring for people. That's awesome.
Well, you bring up both of my kids are musical theater kids. And, the thing that has always impressed me about watching my daughters are on stage and they love performing, but in order for them to be on stage,
right,
there are 30 people almost behind every one of those kids that are on stage making something happen. And so if I love doing the sets, or if I love doing the marketing, or if I love just doing the costumes, and
right,
the show doesn't happen without all of those people bringing their talents and collaborating there. And I'll tell you, I've gotten so much enjoyment out of just collaborating with really, really gifted people that take your thoughts or ideas and turn it into something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And so it's really cool. Yeah.
Well, Tom, thanks for joining us today. And I appreciate all the listeners out there who are also making a difference in people's lives. Let's go and do that. Until the next episode, Regan, thanks for joining us. Tom, thanks for being a great guest.
Thanks, Chad. Really nice to talk with you.
Yep. Have a great rest of the day.
Hello, PDA. Are you looking for a cool way to educate your little patients about good dental hygiene? Perhaps you're trying to find a fun and different gift option for the holidays. Or maybe you're looking to make an impact in your community. Well, I'd like you to meet Billy Bicuspid. He's the star of the new book, I Had a Rotten Tooth, transcribed by Tom Latourette and illustrated by Katie Williams. I had a rotten tooth, which was rotten to the core. What was once so slick and shiny was not shiny anymore. Baby teeth grow up and sometimes they turn bad. It's nature versus nurture, and the story can be sad. So gather around the campfire, and I'll let you know who's boss. A tall tale of teeth defeated by a brush, toothpaste, and floss. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the town of Tooth Decay has a bit of a problem. The Candy Bar Express is arriving at high noon, but Billy and his Rotten Tooth gang are looking to ambush those sweets and procure them for their own nefarious purposes. Who will stop Billy in this motley mess of munchers? Can the bicuspid bunch, wise guys, molar mob, infamous incisors, crafty cuspids, and the dirty dozen, can they be defeated? Oh, have no fear, my fellow PDA fans. Our heroes, Dominic Dentist, Price and Brush, along with the Toothpaste Twins, Mouthwash Meg, Fanny Floss, Fluoride Flo, Enzo Enamel, and Timmy Toothpick are here to save the day and the town. And you too can be a dental hero. All you've got to do is buy a book. We've got a buy one, give one program going. You buy a book, and we give a book to a local child fighting cancer in your local community at one of your local hospitals. The BTB Foundation has been helping local families for over 20 years. We've given $1.4 million to over 100 families that are fighting cancer. And now through this book, I Had a Rotten Tooth, you can do the same thing. Go to btbfoundation.org or ask your friends at PDA how to help support us and buy this book, I Had a Rotten Tooth, and not only educate children about the benefits of good dental hygiene, but help a child fighting cancer. Thank you so much, and we appreciate it. Have a great day, and go be a dental hero. Yeah!
Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.